each year is getting better and better. It's really a special fishery we have, and it gives guys that don't necessarily have the means to go to the canyons or big fuel capacity, but you can still go out there 8, 10 hours and have a kick-ass day. Go over some tricks I learned. I hope you guys have some better days out there. I'm going to gear it towards boats that can go 70 miles an hour all over the ocean. I'm 31 down east, cruising 20 knots, offshore at a little slow. So I've done some things to get the best out of your bite at your chosen location. We never seen this before. So let's go. Yeah, a little about me. I'm at booth 309 here. I'm in Newport. Do a lot of talk fishing, a lot of tuna, a lot of inshore stuff. But talking tuna are pretty much what I obsess about. So if you have any questions after this that we don't have time for, go to booth 309. Tuna are by far the strongest fish in the ocean. They're my favorite. It's pretty cool. We have such a kick-ass fishery. People come from all over the world to experience. So if you're not trying to get these fish in your boat, you're doing yourself a disservice because they're awesome. We have a very healthy bluefin stock. We have wreck fish all the way up to giants. I'm sure you guys have heard about some of the giants, in close the past couple of years, which is something that's rare and pretty special. But the past 4 or 5 years, we've got a lot of yellowfin on these near-shore, mid-shore grounds, which has also been rare. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd be lucky to land one. You have to go to the canyons. But now we have this unique fishery inside, close to home, that has quite a few yellowfin in the late season, August and September. So when I talk about the near-shore, mid-shore waters, pretty much it's like 15 to 20 miles to about 60 to 70. That's what I consider like the mid or near-shore waters. You're not going to the canyons. It's something you can do in a day. It's just south of Block. I consider it kind of like the middle of Montauk over. These purple lines you see here are the shipping lanes. This next slide, I'll break it down a little bit. So you've probably heard of a few of these names here. Some common spots like the dump, that's that big square there, the southeast corner, southwest corner. The claws is identified up there. The gully, Tuna Ridge, Suffolk, the Horns, Butterfish Hole. These are common names you've heard, but it's all within our backyard. These are all the near-shore and mid-shore spots. But specifically, kind of your point of reference is a 30-fathom line. So that's 150 to 230 feet. Some old-timers call it the bloodline. Bluefin tend to come in on that contour line every year. The bait comes in on that line, and they kind of spread off of that. So if you can focus on being about 100 feet-ish to 200 feet, that ballpark, 150, 180, 30 fathom, that's kind of where the action is for our near-shore bite. On the next slide, we'll talk about temp break, chlorophyll, how that reaction draws in bait and fish. It's more so important closer to the canyons or the Gulf Stream edges, these warm water breaks that we have to talk about. But we do have an effect inshore. One thing you need to absolutely remember is bait is the most important thing. You're trying to find fish, bait on these mid to near shore grounds is the most important factor. Find the bait, okay? So you want to go out any offshore trip prepared. These are all sea surface temperature charts and chlorophyll charts. There's a gazillion companies that have them. The night before your trip, download it, have it on your phone, have it in your back pocket, because you never know. You might have a report, you might go to where you think bait and fish are, and could be a ghost town. Happens all the time. So sometimes you got to start from scratch. Find some warm water, find where the bait is, find where the life is, and then go from there. So there's a few different companies and programs I like. Rip Charts is an app. It's really good. I think it's like $70 a year. And they update it all the time. They're chlorophyll charts, sea surface temp charts. That's what I use. Rofs.com is kind of like the high end. It's a little more expensive. They're a little more detailed. If you want to pay the money, that's the best of the best. OceanTemp.com, that's another one that has pretty good data. But that's a good piece of the puzzle you want to have in your back pocket. Know what the water temp is like. So how the whole interaction works. So as I said, it's more prevalent off the canyons. The warmer the water gets, the further these eddies of warm water off the Gulf Stream come into our nearshore, our backyard waters. And how the life system starts is that interaction from warm to cold water mixed with sunlight creates chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll is what mesoplankton, phytoplankton feed on. What they feed on, what feeds on them is smaller bait fish and foraging fish. You get bait fish, you get predators. So it all starts from the temperature, creating chlorophyll up. So that's why you want to look for the breaks, because that'll ultimately show you where the life is. Is there a way to play the video off of this? So while you're cruising out, I'm talking about temps, look at your sounder and notice when it changes by a degree, a half a degree. Keep an eye on it, keep watching it. Watch when it goes up and then back down. Mark it, and that's going to be your temperature break. That's where you know where the warm water is. And when you get there, you can start seeing stuff like this. Just like a gazillion dolphins. You can cast ahead of them, cast behind them. They're also finding bait. So a lot of times there's yellowfin mixed in with them. So if you find dolphins, take your time, cast around them. They're going to show you where some life is. This is just some whales, I think. So this is kind of what you're really looking for out there. Their blow spouts you see are clear as day from miles and miles away. Get yourself a good set of binoculars, auto-stabilizing binoculars. On slow days, you find those spouts out in the distance. It could make or break your day. So before we go to the next, I want to just emphasize, respect the wildlife, respect the whales. It's their life. They've been here way before we were in the water. It's foreign territory to us. Don't hammer up on them. It pushes the fish down. It scares the mammals. It does no one any good. Approach with caution. Just respect what you're doing. You'll spook fish a lot less. So always approach with caution. We don't always get the whale show or the dolphins and the good temp breaks. Sometimes you go there, get a good report from a buddy. Yeah, the fish are busting like crazy out here. Best day we ever had. You go there the next day, ghost town. Nothing. We're looking at a whole lot of nothing. All right, but there's still certain signs that fish are there. In fact, this past year we had a great jig bite for about 2 months, and there was no signs of life other than oil slicks. Oil slicks are a very good indicator. It shows you that there's oily bait down there being ravaged. Okay, so literally what you want to look for. Imagine dropping, drop a gas in the water at the fuel dock, which no one's done, right? Because that would never happen. But when it does, it expands, right? And eventually, as the tide pushes it, it kind of becomes a little avenue. Imagine that, but amplified. All right. So when you're trying to find new slicks, that's new bait that's been worked, that's been foraged, worked together. Fish have been on that. There's nothing to find. Look for the noticeable oil slicks. If you can find a puddle, a circle, that's brand new. Get updrift of that, and you're going to be in good shape. If you can't find a new one, you're going to find existing ones that looks like a little avenue. Okay, and you want to find the narrow side of it. So the longer the oil's been lifted off the bait, it spreads out. It spreads out. The wider side is behind us. The narrower side is fresh. Okay, so you want to try and find the narrow side of these oil slicks. All right, and when you're jigging specifically, come up and down on your drifts, and remember what side had the fish. Sometimes it's literally left or right of that oil slick. They could be foraging bait along one edge of it. So make little notes on your drifts while you're finding these slicks. So you can also smell them. Like, people think I'm a wizard, but it's not. It's super obvious. At night, I'll stop the boat. I'll go, you guys smell that? You're like, did you fart? Nope. Smell. It smells like fresh seafood, right? Sand eels. Not almost all, but the predominant amount of bait we've had in these nearshore waters are just a ton of sand eels, and you can smell it. It smells like walking into a fresh bait shop. So stop and look around. If you don't have any other visual indicators or scents, these little tuna chicks and terns, they dance on the water, and they pick off some of the oil and some of the scraps of the fish. That's a sign that there's tuna there. They know a lot more than we do underneath the water. So if you see these little birds dance on the surface, stop and set up. I must have had a dozen trips where I didn't see a single tuna, whale, or dolphin. I saw slicks and birds, and we had killer days. Killer. So some really good signs if you know what to look for. Another option to find life is weed lines. We get these big patches of Sargasso weed that come in offshore, and they hold forage bait. So kind of the same process as the chlorophyll, which brings in phytoplankton and forage bait. Forage bait's already here, so you skip right to that step. So a lot of times you'll have mahi underneath them, you'll have tuna on the edge. So when I see these after we've caught our tuna, or if it's a slower day or something, I'll put some Nomad DTX deep divers out, and I'll do a few passes. If there's tuna there, they're going to hit it. We plucked a couple wahoo this way doing it, 30 miles south of Rhode Island. And I like to, while my customers are pitching out for mahi, which you can use piece of squid, chunked butterfish, chunked mackerel, epoxy jigs, your actual tuna jigs you're using. While they're doing that, trying to fill the boat with mahi, I'll drop way deep for wahoo. Because what they do is they pick off the chicken mahi. So if there's a bunch of small mahi, you're not probably going to mark the wahoo, but they're down 200-300 feet. And they'll come up, look up. So if you can jig down, I've only got one this way, but I've hooked up a few times, but they're there. So just remember, wahoo are here, and it's super fun on the jig. So he asked if, while we're trolling the nomads, if I put wire out. No, because I'm not specifically going for wahoo. They'll bite it. Tuna will bite it too. And they have to inhale that to get up past your connection. So odds of them actually breaking off are pretty slim. If you're targeting just wahoo in Florida, then yeah, you want to have wire. But I don't. Yeah, so I touched on it earlier. Be respectful. These whales are big, majestic animals. It's their world. They're giving us these clues of where the fish are. Casting on top of them isn't going to help you. Running them over is not going to help you. If there's other boats in the area and you run down life, you're going to be hated. So approach slowly with caution. Don't cast in front of other people. Cast behind the whales, behind the dolphins, and you'll do a lot better. But just respect the wildlife. Having decent electronics at the very minimum is going to change your game. You can't go out there and just hope and guess. You got to see what's under your boat. So I'm real lucky to be partnered with Ray Marine. They give a really good image under us. So I'll show you a couple of pictures here. This is an example of what my standard high chirp looks like with the auto setting. Okay, so it's still giving me a pretty good picture. You can see on this one on the left here. Is that the pointer? That's a tuna coming up on the jig, which I thought was pretty cool. So this is about 5 minutes before this, so I knew we were coming up on fish. Fast forward about 5 minutes, and there's just a stockpile of 60-inch bluefin on the bottom, and we were doubling and tripling up. It was awesome. Again, no birds, no life. I just saw some oil slicks, real long. It was awesome. And here's what you want to see. This is, if your eyes are glued to your screen, you're hoping to see some life, this is what you want. This is a wolf pack of tuna. These are, it's about 50 or 80, 30 to 50 inch bluefin. Same thing here. This line here, so let me back up. In these images, opposed to the two before, I have my gain turned up. All right, and the reason is that kind of projects the image a little larger, so it gives you more a view of what you're looking at. It's not sensitivity, but it amplifies your targets. And it also shows you what's called a thermocline. That's when different temperature waters meet. A lot of times bait and fish will travel along that thermocline. So you can see it here, about 60 feet. And in this image, they're just above it. They're kind of cruising right along it. In this image, the thermocline's a little higher, about 40 feet, and they're well below it, right? So if I didn't know that, I wouldn't really know where to put my jigs. Based on seeing the pile of fish, I was like, all right, everyone, drop down, 10 cranks up, keep it on the bottom, or under the thermocline, you know? So having your electronics lets you know that information. And this is just a really cool shot. So this is what a gazillion, billion, unquantifiable amount of sand eels looks like. 100 feet thick of sand eels. Yeah, there's no tuna here, but you guys know what these are? Humpback whales, pretty cool. You can literally see them just going to town. So you got 1, 2, this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 whales. So find the whales, find the bait, ultimately find the life. On this day we were giant fishing and went 0 for 3. Tough day, but really cool day seeing the life and all the whales. There was like 2,000 whales that day. So I try and jig, pop, and chunk when I can. I like light tackle approach. I like showing my clients something new. But there's times when there's just nothing else going on. And you have to troll to cover some ground, find the life. And these chatter lure side trackers have been game changer. You don't have to have outriggers anymore. These have a little fin on these squid bars that pushes them out a solid 20, 30 feet. So you and your 21-foot boat can have a spread like you would on an offshore sport fishing boat without needing any outriggers. So it's been a game changer, and they go crazy for them. The calamari color and the black purple color were by far the 2 hottest colors. So when you're trolling, keep an eye on your sounder, find bait. When you mark fish, remember where they were. Come back around, make another pass until you start recognizing patterns. 5 to 6 knots is perfect. And they run really true. So Justin's here from Chatter Lures. I'd highly recommend grabbing a few bars from him. I'm not going to get too much in the gear because that'll be a whole other seminar, but I'm lucky enough to be fishing with Daiwa, and they have some kick-ass gear. They have the top tier spinning in and conventional reels in the game, the Saltiga, which I obviously have a few of them, but you don't need that level. They offer such a great variety of mid to lower end reels that do the job. So for instance, I have this on a lot of my jigging reels. This is Saltist MQ. The price point's around 200 bucks. It kicks ass. We put a lot of fish on it. Never had one break. So we're at 8, doing 2 years in a row now. And it does the job. It's very affordable. The other reel they have is this Free Swimmer 10K. This thing, there's nothing else like it in the industry. Hit that button there, and that allows you to have a very minimal drag to run live baits. This is kind of a tool for freshwater and smaller game. So they've introduced this for big game. It's a game changer. It's the Free Swimmer 10K from Daiwa. It's badass. And kind of like right in the middle, the higher end, is the Certate spinning reel. This is a 14K size. Almost all my rec size tuna gear for spinning is 14K. This is essentially all of the innards of the flagship Saltiga for about half the price. There's a few minor differences. You know, the knob is rubber instead of having a metal knob. Some cosmetic stuff, but the gears, the rotor, everything is the same. So this is a badass reel, the Daiwa Certate. So if you want to get top of the line reel without spending top of the line money, the Certate. So, you know, like I said, if you're going to get any saltwater spinning reel on this side, the 14K kind of is right in the middle. It can kind of do a lot. So that's the size I'd recommend for you guys. 65 to even 80 pound Power Pro if you're popping, 50 to 65 or even 40 if you're jigging. Okay. And having the right rod is super important. It's not like inshore fishing with bass, sea bass tog, you can get away with whatever you want. These fish will kick your ass so freaking fast, all right? And if you don't have the right gear, you're gonna be tapping out that much sooner, all right? So the technology's come a long way with carbon fiber, these sensitive guides. They've done so much to change the game. Jigging World and Daiwa both have some badass rods that are right here at the show you can put your hands on, as well as some up here. But some of my favorite rods from Jigging World for popping is this AMF popping rod. Super light. It's not going to tire you out. It's got all the characteristics you want of a popping rod for a very good price. This is the Jigging World AMF popping rod, medium heavy. Daiwa also has a comparable rod. The Blackwing, this is their heavy. This is even priced even better. This is at $279, I believe. And this is the same thing, all carbon construction. It's not going to break. It's durable. It's going to smash around the boat, and you can cast a plug a mile. So these are kind of the two popping rods I use. And then for jigging, and this is kind of more where the stamina that you need comes from the rod. So this is designed to do the work for you when you're jigging. So I have to put it on my hip and kind of do the jigging motion, but the rod tip does a lot of the work. You're not jerking up and down. The smallest little motion is designed to have the action to flip that jig for you. Okay, so if you have the right rod, you're not going to tire out. You can actually jig all day long. So if you're doing this with some random rod that some guy showed you that's a popping rod or a mid-range rod, you're going to be tired so soon you'll be going in early. Have the right gear. Again, this is the Jigging World AMF jigging rod, 450 gram. All right, so this is a really cool rod. What I like about it is a lot of guys aren't using it for the purpose I use. This is the Daiwa Proteus Heavy. It's their West Coast. They advertise it as a popping rod. I use it as my pitch bait rod or my dead stick rod. We'll talk more about what exactly that means. But you can see how high the grip is. So that's me fighting a 65-inch fish and kicking its ass. And you can see right here is kind of where it shuts off. So it shuts off super high. That's where the parabolic flex stops. So all the strength stops at that point. Okay, so your sensitivity is from that point forward. Your backbone is from here aft. This is unique. We don't really see this rod style on the East Coast. Most rods bend into here. So the reason this is nice, see how far away from the rail that shut-off point is? I'm able to work around the boat a lot. So it's a good small boat rod. You have 3 or 4 of your buddies on, you hook up with 2 or 3 fish. All of a sudden you gotta go around engines, you gotta go under a rod because the fish went opposite directions. This rod has such a high shutoff point, it gives you such versatility to move around the boat and beat the fish. And it's super sensitive, it's light, you can do so much with it. It's kind of like my go-to if I had to have one tuna rod, it's this one. And we'll talk more about dead sticking, pitch baiting, what that means. It's just a cool shot. You can see a little tuna on the jig, and in the background, a little brown shark looking for a snack. So on your leaders, you want to be heavy. You want to have the strength to prevent breakoffs, but at the same time, sometimes they do get leader shy. So you want to have a selection. So I have anything from 40 pound, which is awfully light, all the way up to 100 pound for these inshore fish. My go-to when I'm going out there, I don't know what the bite is, and I'm pre-rigged, is 80 pound fluoro. I like J fluoro. Seagar's great, but I always have at least a 10-foot leader, 10 to even 15 foot. The more leader you have, the more shock absorption you have. The longer your leader is, if you get a chafe, you can break off by your jig or retie if there's a hot bite, not have to cut everything, retie again. Start long. It's advantageous for the angler. And then the knots. So specifically for tuna, the 15-foot leader, you can't have a swivel. It's going to go through the guides, right? Because part of that leader is going to be on your spool. You have to have a direct line to leader knot. Slim Beauty knot is a good one. PR knot's good if you have a machine, a bob, and you know how to do it. It's very fancy. This FG knot is really the one I use right here. This is a game changer. There's any knot you have to learn, it's the FG knot. Okay, it's super, super strong. Once you know it, it's very easy to tie. You can tie it in 30-knot winds. You can tie it underway. Okay, you put it in your mouth. Not going to do a demo, but you can do it with wind going at speed, so it's a perfect knot offshore. And it's strong as hell. I've never had one break unless it was tied incorrectly. Yeah, so not cinching it is the reason it fails 9 times out of 10. There's a million of them on YouTube. There's a finish called the risotto finish, which is probably the fanciest one. I don't even do that. I do what's called an offshore finish. So without telling you how to do the knot, pretty much you're weaving back and forth, and then your tag end of your braid, I continue weaving once I cut the leader back down my main line. So it ends up with a slight bevel, so it goes through your guide's a lot easier. It's tough to explain without showing you, but if you guys have questions, just reach out to me. Very important tool to have on the boat. So you have to cinch that knot properly, all right? These are $20 on Amazon, these knot pullers. What you want to do is wrap your braid, your main line, at least 3 or 4 wraps around one of these, and your leader, 3 or 4 wraps around the other, making sure not to cross one another. You don't want to put a weak point in your line, and then snug up tight until the color of that knot changes color. It'll turn darker. That's how you know it's fully seated. Some top water stuff. You know, we don't do as much of that because I got a down east boat. If the bite's on fire, I don't have to move around a bunch. Noise isn't an issue. We do throw poppers and stick baits. So these are some of the main brands you've probably heard of. Mad Mantis makes probably the best popper of the game right now. Ron Z is absolutely my #1 lure for tuna. If I had to have one tuna lure the rest of my life, it's 100% 10-inch Ron Z, 5-ounce head. So I kind of talked about it earlier. When you pull up on these whales and dolphins, and you're pretty confident fish are underneath you, don't cast in front of them. Cast behind the dolphins. Cast on the edge of the life. All right. The tuna will come up on the edges of the bait that they're working, and it can be difficult fishing heavy gear like this. But you want to try and have a little bow in your line. That little bow kind of gives it a repercussion sort of feel, and it gives you a much more solid pop. If it's super taut and tight, you're going to end up popping out of the water. So it's almost like a little buffer. So a little bit of bow in your line on your pops, and you'll be popping with more consistency. So stick baits, this is, in my opinion, kind of more of a Cape Cod type thing, where fish are more on the surface but not aggressively feeding. But they do work very well. South of Rhode Island, Strategic Angler, Siren, Daiwa, all make really good stick baits. The retrieve you want to do with these is a long cast, point your rod down, and a long sweep. Reel back up your slack till you're tight, and a long sweep. And it gives this big wavy motion just under the water, just under the surface. And then that pause, as you're recollecting, usually is when you get hammered. Big sweep and a pause. So the jigging styles that I like to do that produce, if you have guys that know how to jig, like with the AMF jigging rod there, you can speed jig, all right? So that's when you get a certain cadence and you're moving up or down the water column at certain speeds. You can figure out how the tuna want to bite. So you might slow it down, you might come up 10, 20 feet, drop it back down, maybe 10 quick jerks. You can adjust. You have to be able to pick up that cadence to know, how to adjust accordingly. I get a lot of clients that can't do it, and it is hard. It's tiring. So we'll do sometimes slow jigging, which is rather than going with the full cadence up, you're doing one big swoop, reel down, one big swoop up, reel down. So just kind of pushing up the water column. And that can a lot of times get a bite too. The last thing, jigging with a rod in your hand, is I call it the sweep jigging. Literally, we got so many bites like this. It drives the guys on the boat crazy that are working their butts off speed jigging. And the guys just holding the rod, they're getting all the bites. Drop to the bottom, just up and down. That's it. The boat's rocking, it's drifting. So that's part of the action of the rod, not just you. You know what I mean? So you factor all that in, you have some pretty decent action on the bottom. And a lot of times big fish are down there, you're not marking them, you just get hammered. There's so many jigs to choose from. Chatter Lures has a great one. Daiwa's got a ton of speed jigs and sweep jigs. But a few keynotes you want to take away. Always tie to the solid ring. This is like a mistake I see all the time. Do not tie to the split ring, okay? That's to attach your terminal connections. This bears all the strength. Tie directly to your split ring only, okay? Some setups have a jigging swivel like this. You've got a strong ball bearing swivel attached to your solid ring. In this instance, you go right to that swivel, okay? But never the split ring. Okay, so Ronzi setups. This comes back to that Daiwa Proteus, kind of does it all rod. Dead sticking. There's one technique I had to use of all of them. It'd be dead sticking. Can't tell you how many trips have been saved from just a rod sitting in the rod holder. That's what dead sticking is, by the way. The rod is just in the rod holder. It's set to a depth. No one's touching it, okay? And again, the boat and then set the drift of the boat is doing that action. With the right rod, back to the Proteus, super fast tip, shuts off low. There's a lot of springy action on that tip. So as the boat's moving around, it's kind of twitching and diddling that Ronzi pretty good. Yeah, so if we're marking fish at 50 or 60 feet, you can set a Ronz right at that depth. You can set one lower, set one higher. All depends on what you're seeing and what you want to do. But if I'm not seeing anything, I put one right down to the bottom, one crank, stick in the rod holder. I'll put one right down to the bottom, 5 or 6 cranks right in the rod holder. So I stop about 20 feet from the bottom and on the bottom. And I adjust accordingly as, I notice what our drift is doing, how fast we're moving. If I have to let a little more line out, I will. But I like to dead stick and do all my jigging with spinning reels. So when you're dead sticking, you want the boat has to set the hook for you, okay? So I back my drag off, which is normally locked down about 17 to 20 pounds minimum. I back it way off. Usually it's a full 360-degree click where I can just barely pull it, all right? So as it's moving, it's not pulling any drag, but it's loose enough where if I was to grab it, I can easily pull it, okay? So this way the fish can bite it, swim away with it, it's in its mouth. But by the time you go and realize it, you grab your rod, then you give a slow click 180 degrees, then you're about 10, 12 pounds, then you can lift up and reel in and set the hook, okay? So when you're dead sticking, don't just go grab it, let the boat set the hook, okay? And ease it in, and then you're on, it's game on. We've got more tuna dead sticking than any other way. Chunking is a very successful way to fish too, especially late in the summer when you have shitty drift conditions. The sunlight's very bright, it's very hot, the fish are down deep. Chunking is sort of an art, but you want to get yourself a couple flats of butterfish. And how you want to think about this is you want to have multiple streams of bait going down, okay? So no sinker. This is when your leader size and clarity is very important. And when I say clarity, I mean make sure your leader is clean. Okay, all that grime and slime on your leader, the salt, that refracts off the sunlight. And on tough days, the tuna won't bite because of that. So I keep little packets of alcohol wipes. They each drop, I wipe it down. Okay. So you want to have little pockets of bait. So you have your pre-cut up chum, your butterfish. You throw out a handful, I don't know, 10 or 15 pieces, and deploy 1 or 2 baits with them. Let them drift, open bail, let it drift down with the bait, all right? Once they're about 150, 200 feet away, drop another pile down, all right? Stagger it. You get 2 piles going down, so now they're staggered, right? And you could, if you want to do a third one, if you have enough baits and guys with rods on their hands, you could have 3 piles simultaneously going down. Once you're about 300 feet away, the first pile, you pull up your baits, okay? And you reset, you do it again. So the whole time, you constantly have a flow of bait going down with your chunks. And eventually, once the fish are on you, it's awesome. It's very slow and boring until you get the fish. Once you're on them, they'll be right under the boat. It's like an aquarium. You can hand feed them. Pitch bait little little chunks to them, and it's awesome. But the most important part is keeping those bait piles staggered. So there's always a flow coming to the boat. Because if they just find one pile, the fish might locate it, they might feed on that, and then you didn't let enough out closer to that other pile. Now they don't know where the stream is coming from. So as long as they're close and we keep that stream going, they know where the next feed is coming from, if that makes sense. All right, so live bait is also a very effective way. Obviously, every fish eats live bait. So I always have squid jigs or smaller jigs on board, especially on slow days. You can jig up mackerel, whiting, squid, and I'll essentially just with one large 8/0 or 10/0, 4 to 5x hook, I'll deploy that sort of like a chunk. I'll kind of have my drag set very minimal in strike, so while everyone else is jigging, I have one bait with a live bait going off, and a lot of times that's what gets the bite. Every once in a while I'll put a sinker on, drop it right to the bottom. And we get a lot of big fish that way, sometimes too big, and we don't want to deal with them. One effective way to control your depth with live baits is a balloon. You guys have probably seen balloons floating around boats offshore and stuff, so that's essentially just a giant bobber. That's all it is. You can tie the balloon directly to your line, or there's certain clips. Tunacious makes a balloon clip where it slides onto your line and you tie the balloon to the clip. But that way you can let your depth out where you want it, say 50, 60 feet, put your balloon out, and then let that out. So then that can get away from your boat, but at a set depth. You can stagger your depths. And I have to do that too because when my clients are jigging or chunking, whatever they're doing, they're in one section, I'm trying to get a fish tight on the other side of the boat. I can use the balloons to get some separation from my baits. And then you have a few different techniques happening at once. So one of the most important things in this whole operation is networking. You can have your sea surface temp charts. You can have a buddy who told you one thing, this and that. You want to find legitimate fishing friends in the industry. Book a couple charters, learn the tricks of the trade, and then network your butt off. Go to the bait shop, ask questions. If you see guys coming into the boat ramp, they got a heavy load, some offshore gear, just ask them some questions. Throw them a little persuasive beer. Hey, I'm new to this. I'd like to learn some stuff. And unless they're a total asshole, they're going to share it with you because they went through the same struggle figuring it out. It's not always easy. So having a good network of friends you trust is going to make or break your days. And another big thing I didn't touch on is the technology we have now. So Starlink is a thing. Okay, you can put Starlink on your boat. You have full Wi-Fi, texting, data options, phone calls offshore. You can have your sea surface set right in front of you. You can call your buddy. By the way, hey, fish are slamming over here. Here's the Latin long. No more sketchily saying stuff over the radio, trying to be incognito so no one knows where the hell you are. Just call your friend, And I'm not a T-Mobile rep here, but I'm sure you guys may have heard they have a new Starlink beta program going out. So in July, they're supposed to release it where you're going to have actual data and phone call services right from your service plan. So I'm excited about that. One other very important thing, okay? The most important thing. Fishing is great. We all want to have fun. Going back to our family and friends, people that love us, is more important, okay? Always go out there prepared. Understand the weather can change. Take time reading the forecast. Bring extras of everything. Extra belt, extra filter, all the tools you need, extra oil, extra two-stroke oil, whatever stuff you need on board. Have extras of everything, including your gear. Have a float plan. You guys know what a float plan is? Pretty much just a system. It's a system in place. You let someone know where you work pretty much. Hey, going to here, this spot, I'm expected to be back at this time. Okay, if you don't hear from me 8 hours from then, call someone, something happened, okay? Talk to people out there on the radio. Even if it's just a common radio station, 6-8. Most annoying channel that there is, but everyone talks on it. So these people know your boat name, where you are, they're familiar with who you are if something happens, all right? The last thing you want is to have your boat start sinking. No one knows where you are, no one knows who you are, you're going down, okay? So always remember that's a possibility. You know, we're not supposed to be on the ocean. Be safe, number one thing. Get the right tools for your end game. Spend the money on a good gaff. The last thing you want is to go out there all day, finally you get a fish, and you're like, oh shit, what the hell do I do? What the hell do I do now? So spend the money on some gaffs. LT Marine's here, they make a really good gaff. Marita gaffs are great. Swim hooks are, if you do catch a fish that's giant size, over 72 inches, that you cannot keep, you have to swim that fish. You have to be respectful and respect the fishery. You have to swim the fish, get it back to life, and release it. So when I say swim the fish, these fish come up pretty much dead. They're full of lactic acid. They're literally like burning. Their meat is burning. But if you swim them and pump oxygenated water back through their gills, they'll come back to life. And they'll let you know when it's time to be released. They'll start kicking, and they'll come back to life like a giant. Just putting down that swim hook, and they swim right down, all right? But if anyone sees you out there and you catch a giant, you don't know what to do, and you kill it, and this thing floats down, and people see you, you're going to be victimized pretty hard out there. They're not going to like you, okay? It is a good idea to have a harpoon, too. Harpoon in a ball. If you do get a fish that you're able to keep, well, a 70-inch legal fish is pretty heavy. You know, you might not be able to gaff it and just swing it in. So it's a good idea to have a harpoon in it, have a dart, have a backup system just in case things get crazy towards the boat. You know, and invest in the end game gear if you really want to get tuna on your boat there. That's all I got, guys. I'm at booth 309. We'll do some questions now. If there's not time for everything, you can feel free to go over there and talk to me all you'd like. He asked what colored Nomad DTXs I use. I like the purple and black and the pink and black. Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Stay safe out there, okay?